Afternoon, and thank you for spending your lunch with us today. My name is Matt Adams. I'm with the Building Industry Association. We are very excited about the topics that we're going to be talking about today. As we all know, the city of San Diego has implemented a host of regulatory and process reforms, all intended to try to stimulate housing production in the city of San Diego. And quite frankly, they're going to have to if they have any chance of hitting that 107,000 unit RENA target that they have to do in the next 8 years. But I'll tell you, if they don't do it, it won't be for a lack of effort, because the city of San Diego has done so much to try to incentivize and stimulate housing production. I wish other cities were as dedicated as San Diego has been. Now, we're going to begin with Mike Hansen, San Diego's planning director, and Brian Schoenfish. He's the program manager for the city of San Diego. They're going to walk us through the city's toolbox. They call it their housing toolkit. It's a one-stop shop, web-based compendium of all the programs and incentives that are available to those who are interested, and they're going to walk us all through that. And then we're going to hear firsthand from people who have actually used some of the incentives. So we'll be able to get their perspective, what's working well, what maybe isn't working so good, but their experience using all of these new programs. We're going to speak with Gilman Bishop with Bishop Ventures. He's going to discuss his experiences using Complete Communities. And then we have David Allen, and David is with Trestle Build. And he's going to talk about his experiences when he was putting together his micro unit project. And then we'll have Marcela Escobar-Eck. She's with the Atlantis Group, and she's going to walk us through the utilized development permit. And I'm very interested to hear about that one, Marcela. So look, you don't want to hear from me. You want to hear from our guest. I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Brian to talk about the city's toolbox. Mike, Brian.
Thanks, Matt. And I'll just start speaking a little bit while we pull up the PowerPoint. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Hansen, Director of the City's Planning Department. It's great to see everybody virtually. And Brian and I are going to co-present. So I'm first going to go over a little bit of what we've been working on, and then Brian's going to get into detail on the new housing toolkit that we've prepared. So you can advance the slide, Brian. So the reason that we have put together a new housing affordability toolkit is because over the past several years, the city of San Diego has passed many different housing regulatory reforms and housing incentive programs, housing packages, new tools. So it's gotten to the point where there are so many things out there that that we've done as a city over the past several years that we thought that it makes sense to organize those, make it easier to access, and make sure that we're giving the industry the tools that are needed. And so this is perfect for sort of a tools of the trade presentation. And the city has been leading the way, leading the county definitely, and really the nation in several ways over the past few years. We were the biggest city to eliminate parking requirements for housing near transit. We are the only city that we know of that has allowed unlimited ADUs on single family zones near transit, and many other things, but that's not really the focus of today. But the point being that there's been so many things that have been happening over the past several years that we're really at a point in time where we want to promote it, make sure that our development industry partners are aware of everything that there is, and make it easy to access and utilize for your projects. This is just a snapshot of the work that was done over 5 years from 2014 to 2018. We got a lot of programs done. I'm not going to go over these in detail. This is just to give you a sense of the types of things that the city had been working on over the past half a decade, really. Next slide, Brian. And in 2019, we accomplished a lot. I'm not going to go over this in a lot of detail either. This is the point of the toolkit, so you can learn about these and compare and contrast and find out what's right for your program. Next slide. And last year, I'm going to just maybe spend a little bit more time on this because it's more recent. So I'm not sure everybody's aware of all of these things, but we recently passed a housing legislative package. So there are so many bills at the state level that we implement at the local level, that we put it all together in a big housing package that we took to City Council in the fall, which has now been adopted and fully signed into law. There's a lot of stuff in there, so please check it out in the toolkit. We update our housing element, so we are the largest jurisdiction this cycle to have brought the housing element and get it adopted to the City Council. And we did a Complete Communities Housing Solutions Affordable Housing Incentive Program to have really more of an FAR-based density approach in the city to provide all sorts of incentives and streamlining measures for projects that go above and beyond in affordable housing production. And this is also trying to incentivize naturally occurring smaller units that are more naturally occurring affordable. Middle income density bonus, we finally did get this adopted. This was many years in the making, so that's fully signed into law now. And I mentioned the ADU program. So next. So one of the things that we've also reformed is our land development code update process. Ever since the city updated its land development code many years ago, we've had a regular update of the code. It used to happen every 1.5 or 2 years or so. And we've now standardized this to happen every year. And we are also making it more accessible to the public, to anyone that has an idea for how to make the code better. We put that online. We are opening up meetings to anyone in the public that wants to participate, to provide ideas, review the ideas, and bring this to council on more of a quick basis. And one of the reasons why this is important is because there's so many things that have been adopted that we know that these are not one and done. These are living items that can be adjusted over time as we see that things could be working better. So please share with us when you see something that could be working better. So that's just my quick overview, and I'll turn it over to Brian to get into the toolkit a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Mike. As Mike mentioned, with all the housing streamlining programs that the city currently has to offer, plus all of the initiatives the city brings forward in the future, it's critical to the success of these programs that people are aware of them and understand the potential benefits that they offer. Therefore, we have developed a housing toolkit, which is a one-stop shop where anyone can go and find out information on every program that the city has to offer. It's easy to find. Just go to the planning department's webpage, and there it is. Just click on the box. Once you are on the main page of the housing toolkit, you'll first come upon a narrative overview of what the toolkit has to offer, including several links to some of the most detailed documents on the page. The first of those documents is a comprehensive overview of the city's programs and processes. As you can see on the left, this guide is also available in Spanish. This guide is a really comprehensive guide that is really intended for those that may not be familiar with the city's process. It's really geared towards those who again, haven't worked with the programs or processes in the city of San Diego, as opposed to some of the other materials that you will find on the toolkit's main page. So here's a demonstration, here's a sample of what you will find in this comprehensive toolkit. As you can see, it's very detailed. There's a lot of information here. It just dives into specific programs. There's a wealth of information on these pages, including another example of the type of detail that you'll find in this comprehensive guide. Has detailed flowcharts on some of the programs. In some cases, as you know, these are very complex programs, and we tried our best to make them into something that everyone can understand, or at least know what questions to ask when looking through these programs. Now, if you go back to the main page of the housing toolkit, the second link that you will find may actually be one of the most beneficial for those of you who want to compare each of the programs that are available to determine which may be the best fit for your project or your site. It's hard to fit it here on this screen, but you can zoom in. This table actually provides a side-by-side comparison of all of the different housing incentive programs that the city has to offer. So as I mentioned, this chart right here, you can't see it right now, but it's just more of a visual to show you that this side-by-side comparison will come in, we think will be very beneficial to those who want to look at the variety of programs that are offered when looking at your project site. Now, if you go back to the main page of the toolbox again, you recall seeing a series of boxes with common names that describe each of the individual programs. I'm now going to quickly walk you through a few of the pages that these boxes lead to. For example, if you click on the Senior Housing Density Bonus Program, you'll find a brief overview of the program, followed by a flow chart that provides the different steps that are involved in this particular program. And then at the bottom, you'll see a direct link to the regulations themselves. So you can jump right into the code if you are interested in this particular program. Here's another example. I'm showing this example because if you click on the box for accessory dwelling units, you will again find a description of the various options regarding ADUs, followed by a number of very useful links. As you see here, we have the regulations themselves. We also have a link to the website of Development Services Department, which has an overview of the ADA program. We also have a link to the Companion Unit Handbook, which is a useful guide for homeowners. We also have links to information bulletins that the Development Services Department has for each of these programs. And in this case, we also have links to the standard drawings for ADU building plans and permit-ready ADU plans that are accepted by the City of San Diego. Here's just another example. This is an overview of the 100% Affordable Density Bonus Program, which is a very complicated to explain through conversation because there are many aspects of this program. We have the state regulations in our code, and then we also have our local regulations. So here we try to distinguish between the various options that are available to use. So what we tried to do is really make the narrative as accessible and understandable to the general public as possible. And again, we have flowcharts and links to the regulations themselves. Finally, there are links to all sorts of different housing related resources, including the city's annual housing inventory reports, as well as a detailed listing of every housing related municipal code change over the past several years in chronological order, as well as links to other housing resources. I also want to mention that this webpage is not meant to be static. We will work to continue to update it as new programs come online, as well as whenever there is new information to share or better ways to share it. We are always open for recommendations. It is our main objective with the Housing Toolkit to get the information out so that more people are aware of all the programs and initiatives that the city has available so that we can produce more housing for all San Diegans. And now I'm going to turn it back to Matt. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mike and Brian. Mike and Brian, sounds like you're doing sports talk on the radio. Appreciate your comments. We're going to have time for questions, not only for Mike, but for the other presenters towards the end of the program. So if you have any questions, write them down, and we'll have plenty of opportunity towards the end so we can have that dialogue. I'm very excited about the next part. These are the case studies. These are people that have actually walked through some of these programs. We're going to start with Gilman Bishop. He's going to talk about Complete Communities, one of the newer programs. It's gotten a lot of attention, but no one really knows the intricacies of it. And we're hoping that Gilman's going to be able to provide us his insights of what it was like to work with Complete Communities. So Gilman, it's all yours.
Thank you, Matt. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, my friend.
Okay, great. So I've made my PowerPoint full screen, so hopefully everyone can see it.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. So as you can see, here is the project that I intend to case study today. It's called Sequoia on 5th. It's located in Bankers Hill neighborhood of San Diego at the corner of 5th and Redwood. We just poured the second floor the other day. This project is an 8-story type 1 concrete and glass building. It's 100 units of housing of various unit sizes and unit types. And it has no parking. So it's within a transit priority area. Sequoia was the first project to pull building permit in San Diego this year. We pulled our permit probably around January 1st because we broke ground on January 4th. Let me move to the next slide. Okay, so quickly about my group. I own a company called Bishop Ventures that does mixed income, urban infill housing here in San Diego. My business partners, my joint venture partners, are Murphy Company. This is our second project together. The rest of these projects are other projects that Murphy Company has done independently. They're also a third-party general contractor. So if you're looking for someone to build your project, they're a good candidate, and they're good fellows. You can see the Crest in Hillcrest, 36 units in Hillcrest, the Collins, 24 units in La Jolla. That was an adaptive reuse. Formosa, 20 units in Point Loma, the Point in Pacific Beach, 24 units, and then the Californian in Point Loma, 82 units. So Sequoia on 5th is our latest project. To put it in perspective on how fast development services has gotten at getting things done, we permitted this project from the day we submitted to the day we pulled our building permit in 5 months, which is about 3 times faster than I got the Californian done 5 years ago. So it's really a credit to Brian and Mike and everybody at Development Services. Now, in order to hit that kind of a timeline, you have to be as part of their permit now process. So that's definitely worth writing down if you haven't heard of it. But you've got to be a pretty high level of affordability in order to qualify for the permit now process. But it is definitely an expedited process. Speaking to our site, we had a 10,000 square foot lot on a corner in Bankers Hill, almost adjacent to Bankers Hill's Balboa Park. On that site, we're building 100 units. If you're doing your math, that's a density of 400 units to the acre. And we use the complete communities process. Complete communities requires you to provide 40% of your base density as rent restricted. So on Sequoia, our base density was 25 units. We could have doubled that with 100% micro unit density bonus. That would have gotten us 50. Through complete communities, we were able to build unlimited density, which for us on this site ended up being 100 units. I say it's 40% of the base density, but you can see on this table that 15% of that is 120% AMI. So if you're building smaller units, the 120% AMI units are not as cumbersome to achieve as the 50 and 60% AMI requirements. As you can see, we also had some amenities like a courtyard, spa, pool, roof deck, barbecues, things like that. Here's a shot of the location. Our group always tries to find sites that are walkable to parks, walkable to grocery stores. We're on a bus stop. It's a 10-minute bus ride straight to the financial core. If you're going to use complete communities and you're not going to park the project, I strongly encourage you to find sites that are incredibly walkable. Here's our walkability scores. Our transit scores are going to probably double once the bike lanes are included within the walk scores. Bankers Hill is getting improved bike lanes that go straight downtown right now. This is an important part. If you're going to do complete communities, I'd encourage you to build smaller units so that the rent restricted requirements aren't so cumbersome. Our studios at Sequoia are 354 square feet. Our 1-bedrooms are 478. Our 2-bedroom, 1-bath are 711 square feet. We tried to do 2 things at Sequoia. We tried to create naturally occurring affordable housing, and we tried to mix households within that. So it's not all studios and it's not all very low income. It's a mix of every type of demographic that we could. We were able to achieve over 77% of these units are naturally occurring affordable housing to households at 120% AMI or less. A full 25% of the units are naturally affordable to households making 80% AMI or less. So we're very proud of those numbers. But again, we mixed households. 10% of the project is 2 bedrooms. 70% of the project is studios, and 10% is ones. I hope I did good math there. Here's a rendering of what it looks like from a bird's eye view of this site. Gives you a feel for how tight it is. We have a crane on this project. We anticipate building this project in 14 to 16 months. You can't do that if you have to go 4 or 5 levels underground. So the pros and cons of complete communities. The biggest pro, obviously, is unlimited density, but there are others. You have a scaled impact fee that you pay when you're part of complete communities, which is not available under any other density bonus program in San Diego. Mike, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. And if you build your units under 500 square feet, then you have a significant reduction in your impact fees, which can go towards helping you buy your land. Now, for doing that, obviously, there's a significant community benefit in the inclusionary housing units that you provide. When it comes to cons, 40% density bonus, 40% of the base density being restricted is a challenge. There's a park fee that you'll pay. The park fee is per lot square foot. So you pay less impact fees, but there is this new park fee. You should know that if you're looking at a site in the Midway area that just got increased height with Measure E, Complete Communities does not include the Measure E boundaries of height. So you're limited to, let's say, 30 feet, the coastal height limit in Midway. Even though Measure E made the height much higher, the Complete Communities program did not think to include it, or was not able to include that because Measure E had not been approved at the time. So that can be a big shock if you're looking at land in that area. You'll also want to go to, and Mike and Brian can show us where to go, but there's maps for Complete Communities. You need to know it's not all of San Diego. It's very specific areas, largely along transit, but it's worth taking a very good look at where you can do Complete Communities. It's not everywhere. Those are my main points as it comes to Complete Communities. I think it's a phenomenal program if you're willing to build smaller units with limited parking. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to hit the 40% base density inclusionary requirement. But if you're willing to make those concessions, then I think it can be a very successful program for builders throughout the county. And with that, I will turn it over to my friend, David Allen with Trestle Housing, to discuss microhousing. I'll say that, in my opinion, David Allen is a pioneer in microhousing, especially in San Diego County. And a lot of the things that he's been doing, I learned from personally. So I think we can all learn from each other. Thank you, David.
Great, thanks, Gilman, and awesome project. I've been jealous watching you bring that to fruition, and excited for you, and everything about it is so spot on for what we need right now. So terrific project, super glad to be a friend and colleague of yours and see that come to fruition. So I'm gonna, let's see, try to share my slides here, and my computer doesn't have high.
Nope, we got you.
But if you got me, we'll roll with it. All right. Terrific. So again, my name is David Allen. My company is called Trestle Build. We're an affordable housing development shop that focuses primarily on infill affordable housing. So we've been loving to kind of see the way that these new infill and housing toolkit programs have come online. I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of Gilman's presentation here and talk about micro units, but also have another another topic inside of the density bonus that I think people may find interesting to talk about. So yeah, we've developed properties in San Diego, also in the Bay Area, and in the Seattle area, and by far San Diego's incentive zoning programs have really topped everyone else. So excited to kind of share some things that we're finding. So, first of all, just want to start off by saying that we're still in a housing crisis. COVID did not impact our city in the same way as it impacted San Francisco, where our rents declined significantly. San Diego was hit early, but I read in a article on UT this morning that rents are up another 5% in San Diego year over year, and it still takes more than 3 times the minimum wage to afford the median house, the median rental price. So what are we going to do about that? We really do need to build more housing, both deed restricted affordable housing and naturally occurring affordable housing. So just a little graphic here. For the longest time, our base zoning was producing rental units that were unaffordable. We had a zoning scheme that was producing average unit sizes for apartment developments in our core urban neighborhoods that it was hard to get smaller than 700, 800, 900 square feet per unit because our densities were so low. Well, thanks to the good work of the folks at the city, we've really escalated the zoning over the last couple of years, both with density bonus and now with complete communities. And what we're really talking about is how many times can we cut up this box, this building into more bite-sized and affordable pieces. So just an illustration here on where average rents can be depending on the unit size. So we really focus on the micro units, tend to focus on the micro units that can hit this lower end of the price spectrum. So this is Nook East Village, and then like Gilman, we're achieving a pretty substantial dwelling unit per acre number that's really driven by this FAR-based zoning. So we were able to get 91 units on a 7,600 square foot lot with very minimal parking, and really that parking is key. And I think from the outside, this is a Joseph Long design building. You would walk by it and you wouldn't know that there were 91 units in this little infill site. But we were able to deliver a substantial amount of affordable units in a quick amount of time in a very efficient construction type. So like Gilman, when we're looking for micro unit sites, we want them to be in super walkable neighborhoods. We want to have them be amenitized and really have that be kind of like the selling point. So how can we get people into units that are substantially less expensive but don't compromise on location? So lots of people just say, hey, why would anyone want to live in a micro unit? And they say, it's so small, I can't imagine living like that. And my first comment back to them is people are already doing it. People are sharing 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartments. They're sharing houses with upwards of 2, 3, 4, 5 roommates in order to get at affordability. And that's happening in San Diego right now, and it's taking up our single family housing stock. So when we're delivering micro units, we're delivering what people already want, which is an affordable bedroom price in a good location at the lowest price point. So we want to offer highly amenitized, highly location efficient, but just in a bite-sized chunk. So here's some photos of our one of our micro unit buildings. And then here's the inside of Nook East Village. So again, these are 250 square foot units. So there's not much to them. They're like the size of a hotel room, but it's a bedroom. We furnish them. We provide high-speed Wi-Fi, and they have their own bathroom and kitchenette. So, we're really excited about this product type becoming, legal to build now. We're able to find solutions to build these types of apartments that can deliver on affordability without compromising location. And I think we'll see a lot more of that as with complete communities coming online here. I do want to just pivot real quick to something unrelated to complete communities and micro units, but I think people will find pretty interesting. So I'm just going to spend a short amount of time talking about another brief case study on a project we're working on called Mississippi ECB. And this concept exists inside the current density bonus regulations, and it's off-site. It's an off-site production of your density bonus units. So this particular site is located right next to the Lafayette Hotel in North Park. It's 61 units on a 10,000 square foot site. So it also benefited from a substantial density bonus and was able to achieve, while not micro units, an average unit size, which was very efficient. Also reduced parking, thanks to some of these regulation changes. But the interesting thing about this site is that it is actually the receiver site for 2 market rate projects who had density bonus units in them, who elected to pay our company to provide those units offsite. So why would someone do that? The answer is relatively simple. One is that, just the cost of developing a density bonus unit, it costs the same as any other unit in your building. Say it costs $500,000 to build. And at the end of the day, that unit is only worth a fraction of that. So there's substantial lost value. Now, that's okay. It's part of the density bonus incentive program, is that you provide those affordable units in exchange, you get density bonus. But the city has also created an opportunity for those units to be off-sited in a separate building. And the key to that is that it unlocks the value of some federal subsidies that can be had over the counter that make the financing of that affordable unit or units substantially more efficient. So when you offsite those units into a separate location, we can access federal resources that substantially improve returns to market rate developers. So we think it's a win-win, because not only do we get a density bonus, but not only does the market rate developer get a density bonus, but we also produce a density bonus on top of the received units. And then also we're able to provide, as an affordable housing developer, we're able to provide supportive services and compliance and all the infrastructure related to affordable housing that tends to be more challenging to provide for an affordable, or for a market rate developer. So the key to this is that it needs to be within the same community plan, and it is, or within a mile. And it's also important that it be done with sort of a delicate touch. It can be politically challenging to off-site units. So it's very important to keep in mind the location of the off-sited units, and that the quality of the off-site units are equal or competitive with the market rate units. So we think those 2 things that we've been working on with the new regulations are really exciting for us, and I think there's a lot of value for folks. So so with that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I will pass it off to Marcella, who is the expert at getting it all done.
Great. Thank you so much, David and Gilman and Mike and Brian. I'm excited to participate here with you guys today. My task today is to share with you some tips and tricks for a utilized development permit. And I think most of us, wait, am I showing my PowerPoint right now?
Yeah, we got you. Oh,
Did I?
We
Okay.
had you.
Sorry, I had it, right? Okay.
Right, you had it.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Thank you. So what I'm going to do today is walk you through the utilization of a development permit. As most of you know, and I'll tie it back to the toolkit at the end of the presentation, but Right now, we have some great tools that have been given to us by, the Planning Department Development Services to be able to get projects through the system a lot quicker, in fact, in ministerial fashion. But also, many of us have worked very, very hard on getting discretionary permits for properties. And we want to make sure that we don't lose those discretionary permits and we keep them alive. So I'm going to cover the fundamentals of utilization, kind of staying alive. I'm going to share with you guys today a little known secret about unrecorded permits that exist out there. And then I'm also going to talk about when you really should try and give up your permit. Let's see, am I going next slide? Am I in PowerPoint? Yeah. Hold on a second. Sorry, here we go. Okay. So for those of you that have been working in the trade for a long time, you probably are familiar with Municipal Code Section 126.0108, which talks about the utilization of a development permit. So in most cases, we only have 36 months to utilize a permit, but things happen during those 36 months, right? You can't get financing, things happen, changes in ownership happen, so on and so forth. So how to keep that permit alive right when you're reaching those 36 months? And there are three basic components to keeping your permit alive. You have to demonstrate that you've made a significant investment, that you've done substantial work, or that you've basically implemented use consistent with the permit. So what does significant investment look like? Significant investment could be the preparation of all of your construction documents. If you can demonstrate that you've either obtained or are in the process of obtaining a building permit, that you're working with the DRE, that you've posted bonds, that you've secured loans, those things can qualify as significant investment. Obviously, substantial work, your site prep, your rough grading, contracts to proceed with work, those types of things all count as substantial work. And then use is consistent with the permit is really phased projects. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So again, this is actually the municipal code section that gives you the specifics of some of the things that will qualify, but let's talk about a couple of other things. So I often get questions from people about how old can your permit be? I'm about to give you one of the best kept secrets for infill communities, which is the old subdivision cards. And I think this comes from having been a staff person at the city of San Diego that I even know that these exist. And I fought hard to keep these at the city of San Diego. So in this case study, we had a church campus. Some prospective owners for this existing church in Linda Vista came to us, and they wanted to expand the church and then also create a church campus for themselves. We went through all the title reports. There were no records of any existing permits on the title reports. They had gone to development services. They had done some of their research, and basically they were told they needed a conditional use permit for what they wanted to do. And there were no building records, at the time, and this church was built back in the 50s and 60s. So one of the things that we found is in reviewing some of the old plans, because the owner of the property found some of the old plans, and again, this probably comes from familiarity from having been a staff person, but we found some little numbers written in the corner, which we recognized as old zoning administrator cases. So we were able to go to the old zoning administrator cases and the subdivision cards. And lo and behold, we found an unrecorded permit on the property from 1952. That unrecorded permit actually had an Exhibit A from 1960 that had a complete church campus, including a school, landscape plans, the whole kit and caboodle plotted back in 1960. So what we were able to do was because fortunately a portion of that church campus had been built, so therefore the permit was utilized. We were able to develop an analysis for the church user and staff that showed how we would be in substantial conformance with the new proposed development with the essentially old Exhibit A from 1960. And we were able to successfully get our client permission to be able to utilize that 1952 permit to continue development of their church campus without having to get an additional CUP. Another case study is the 60th unit, and this was a project that we had in La Jolla. Our client, actually, let me back up a little bit. Our client was looking to try and permit a unit that is still existed on the property that was built originally when the original property was built. It was the 60th unit, but it was an illegal unit. And so when they went to the city, because the property had since been downzoned, staff said, well, we're so sorry, but you're going to have to do, property no longer is zoned. You can't have 60 units on this property. In order to have that 60th unit, you're going to need a community plan amendment, which is going to need a local coastal plan amendment, a rezone, and a site development permit. what we were able to do was we actually found the old cases for the original approval of the project. What we found in the zoning administrator staff report was that the property actually had the ability to have 64 units permitted on it at the time that it was built, where only 26 units would be able to be built after the rezoning became effective. Well, one of the things that we were able to prove was that we were able to prove that that 60th unit was actually built, maybe illegally, but still built at the time that the original units were permitted, which still allowed 64 units on the site. We went back, we found all the SDG&E records, we found all the postal records. We were able to demonstrate that there actually were utilities connected to that unit at the time. We were able to demonstrate that mail arrived at that unit, and we were able to legally permit that 60th unit, essentially as solving a code compliance case that was, ancient. So that's one of the examples that I want to show you about keeping your permit alive. But I think one of the things that we should talk about also is knowing when to give up your discretionary permit. And that's Municipal Code Section 126.0110. And I think one of the things that we're finding more and more these days is that because of all of the toolkits that have now been put in place by planning and development services, Mike's team and Elise's team, what we're finding now is some of these really old development permits are actually more of a hindrance to the development of the property than an ability to proceed with certain things. And so we've actually had now about 3 or 4 cases where we've gone back and recommended that the client actually rescind their discretionary permit because we're able to find more options to develop the property consistent with what they want to do today. Now, what I can tell you is the importance of good research and application of the historical data. This is like just reading, putting down tarot cards and not knowing how to read them. So I would like to make a pitch for our team and the importance of being able to do good research and application of historical data on this. And again, just recognizing that your permit can be ancient as far as the city is concerned, as long as you've met the criteria for utilization of a permit. Understanding that not all title reports will show you every permit that exists out there, especially nowadays when we're moving more and more into infill communities. You'd be amazed at how many unrecorded permits actually exist out there. And again, just know when to give up your permit and really look closely at the new regulations and recognize that sometimes giving up your permit is a better place to be. And with that, I will turn it back over to Mr. Adams so that we can proceed to questions.
Yes, thank you, Marcella, very much. You have quite the forensic team on your staff to turn up stuff from 1960s and even in the 50s. That's amazing. Look, we've all heard a lot of information here, and so now we open it up to questions from people who are participating in the webinar. So either put it in the Q&A or in the chat, whichever convenient for you. So while people are thinking of some things, I wanted to ask Gilman and also David, you talked about all the good things that happened. Can you talk about some of the unexpected things that you had to experience when you were developing and then constructing your projects, things that you didn't really think were going to be an issue that turned out to be issues?
David, while I'm thinking, why don't you talk about the SDG&E vault?
Oh, brother, that's just,
there you go.
That's just a function of interesting infill. We in the project downtown, we're asked by SDG&E to install a vault on a 7,000 square foot parcel that was essentially capacity for future development sites in the neighborhood. And it made no sense. It's essentially, we ended up having to build a garage subterranean to accommodate this SDG&E vault, which was substantially more onerous than anything we've ever built before. Usually we're able to either surface mount something or place something in a subterranean vault that was roughly the same size as the actual transformer itself. But yeah, that was insanity, and it would be nice to get some coordination with SDG&E, especially on infill sites, to make sure that we're not placing sort of undue burden on infill sites to carry the rest of the neighborhood. So especially the small ones. I don't know, Gilman, you have some other?
Yeah, I would just mention visitor accommodation units. We really haven't hit anything unexpected, knock on wood, at Sequoia, but we did change tact about halfway through the project. We pulled the permit before Complete Communities, and half of it was apartments maxed out on the 50% density bonus program, and then half of it was visitor accommodation, commercial SRO units, if you will. These days they're called efficiency dwelling units, but it's a commercial use. And it allowed us to move forward with a much higher density project. And then once Complete Communities came along, we did a construction change to just convert it all to residential. And if I move forward today, it just would have been all residential, but there are still instances where there's a role for SRO units or efficiency dwelling units within projects beyond density bonus. So that was a big change that we made that was somewhat unforeseen when we got started. We were tracking it, but it's something to include in your toolkit as you move forward.
I just have one more add-on real quick. Sure. Some advice that I'll pass on that I wish I had followed. When we were developing, as we're on a third micro unit building, it took us until now to figure out that our on-site property manager, the best on-site property manager, doesn't always want to live in a micro unit. So we, in our future buildings, are making it a point to have a well-appointed on-site managers unit that is not a micro unit, so that we can identify the best possible manager to manage our communities. So, we were so focused on how many units we could get in that, that manager unit was somewhat of an oversight. And, they were just dummies, but others don't have to make that mistake.
I'll follow up for both of you. Now, a lot of this is by right, obviously, but what was the, let's call it community receptivity surrounding your project when you started to, when the neighborhood started to become informed as to what was going on? Did you have any challenges or difficulty with community opposition?
I'll go first, Dave. On Sequoia, like you said, it was as of right. And we weren't required to go to community planning groups in order to get our approval. We were going to have a crane. So it was important for us to go and meet personally, face to face with each of our neighbors so that they understood who we were, our experience doing construction, our experience with cranes, and walk them through the process. And once they learned that we didn't have any parking, that definitely raised eyebrows. But we were quick to show how the state is encouraging this with their laws, and the city is encouraging with their laws, so that we can drive down the cost of housing. And they get it. Nobody likes to hear it when it's right next to your house, but it's the only way you can build workforce housing, in my opinion. So parking was a big issue, but being as of right, we had pretty strong leverage. How about
Matt,
you, Dave?
I'd like to say something on that too, because
Sure.
Our firm, as Mike likes to say, he's trying to put us out of business, which I'm happy to have happen. But our firm has been more and more looking for ways to find ministerial routes for projects. And we've been very successful in that. But one of the things that we have done, even on ministerial projects, not every one of them, but on some of the bigger ones, we have actually gone out to the community planning groups to present to them. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, they get frustrated because we're basically telling them they don't have a say on it. But on the other hand, we're telling them what's going on, right? And we do listen to their input, and if there are some changes that we can make to incorporate. But that's been important for the council members, because whether it's a ministerial project or a discretionary project, anytime there's a really large project going on in their community, they start getting bombarded by their constituents. So I do think, as Gilman pointed out, even though you don't necessarily have to go out to these groups and it's not mandatory. And a lot of times, you know, most of us would prefer not to have to go out and, you know, present to some of these groups. It's still definitely something that you should keep in mind. Again, it's your property. You're going to be, you know, we're always looking for the good neighbor. And so I would encourage folks that, you know, to make sure they're at least having a dialogue with their neighbors and keeping their council member and their community planning group informed.
All right, we have a question here. This is, I guess, for everyone, including Mike and Brian. What is the one change that you would like to see, or for Mike and Brian, that you have heard folks ask about most often?
What have I heard people ask about most often? I don't know. The first thing that came
Historic.
to mind is historic, as I'm looking at Marcella.
There it is. Thought I'd tee that right up for you.
But maybe I can combine the answer to this with something I see in the chat. So what's the next frontier for programs? What is the one change you'd like to see? I think we need a lot of changes, not just one change, but a couple things that we are going to be focusing a little bit more on now are middle income housing and expediting our community plan update process. So there are a lot of benefits that come together with a community plan update, but we don't think that communities should have to wait 30, 40, 50 years to see one of those happen. So we are working on refreshing that program. And then I see another question too. I may as well just answer it now.
Yeah, go right ahead.
The Complete Communities Housing Solution does provide ministerial approval with a few exceptions, one of them being historic. Also, if there's sensitive habitat on the property, if there's a state or federal issue that prevents the city from being able to offer ministerial approval, then that could be an issue. So it's yes with a few exceptions to answer that question. And then I see another question. Complete Communities, the map hopefully will expand as the areas that are served by transit get expanded. And we're hoping that with Sandag's 5 big moves, that we see an expansion of the area of the city that's covered by high quality transit. That then would in turn create a change to that map and allow the program to be expanded geographically.
And Mike, I think there are a couple things with Complete Communities that I know Brian is working on with this next code update, where now that we're all using it, we're finding, you know, little hiccups here and there, but, you know, just sort of the how the density gets calculated, you know, or if you just have a portion of your site that has a zone, you know, that actually yields the 20 acre. And I think, as Gilman pointed out, one of the other areas that it doesn't apply to, that we kind of wish it had applied to in some cases, where there are some specific plans left over in Mission Valley and a couple other places. So
the only thing I would add is I think we need to bring multifamily density to single family neighborhoods. I think we need to allow the middle class back into single family neighborhoods. I realize that's a challenging one to get done, but it just doesn't seem equitable to me.
If I could just jump in here, one of the things, building on what Marcella just mentioned about Complete Communities, one of the things that we do with our staff is every year, once a new program has been adopted and is now in place, we look at the projects that actually come in and we see how successful they are. We see if there's any language that we need to tweak, make adjustments to the program, because after all, we go through a lot of work to bring these programs forward. So we want to make sure they are being used and they are successful. So we're not afraid to go back even a year later and make adjustments to these programs to make them even more successful through our annual code updates.
Oh, I have a question, because you were all essentially some test cases here, or early ones. How was it working with lending institutions when you were explaining what your project was going to be, since it was something that was new to San Diego? Was there any hesitancy at all, or was everyone excited about the concepts that you were pursuing?
Yeah, I'll take that first. Yeah, we certainly had to shop around to people who were comfortable with the ideas that we were presenting. Luckily, I think that outside of San Diego, some other cities like Seattle, Portland, and in the Bay Area, mainly Oakland and San Francisco, have had quite a lot of this kind of either no parking or micro unit type buildings come on. So there are lenders out there that are familiar with this. So it's more about telling the story of a location on why does this work for this location in San Diego? How is this location kind of similar to the places where we've already seen it work. And those lenders were familiar enough that we were able to get it over the line. So it was just kind of telling a story about that. But I think as more product comes online, the story will tell itself in San Diego.
Well, for me, I would say scale is where it becomes a challenge. You know, we were trying to do 100 units, and we were trying to finance this thing during the pandemic. And we only got one lender that was really willing to come to us with reasonable terms during the pandemic. And that's probably only because we had closed 3 other loans with them in the last 24 months. So if you take the pandemic out of the equation, maybe we'd have had 2 or 3 lenders that I think would have been reasonable. When you wipe out parking and you go micro unit, you're going to be challenged if you're trying to do scale. If you're trying to do over 100 units and you don't have $100 million net worth, you're going to be challenged. So I would say just go in eyes wide open and get a long escrow. If you're trying to do 25 units in North Park, wood frame, type 5 construction, different story. I think that kind of thing can be financed all day. But you know, the higher the stakes, I think the harder it is to find a lender.
Sure. Hey, one other question that came in, my favorite subject these days, VMT. I guess this is for Mike and Brian, maybe all of you. Will the new VMT requirements affect any of the tools that are available in your toolkit?
Maybe I can take that one. I don't think that those new requirements should affect any of these programs. We knew that the transition to VMT was happening. I mean, we've known for many years. It did just finally happen last year. So we've worked on all these knowing that VMT was going to happen. So I don't think there should be an effect on these programs.
All right, good. Look, we only have a minute or so left. Gentlemen and lady, you want to do these projects again? I mean, you've had some pretty good success. Are you looking at more opportunities?
We are getting a lot of calls from clients looking at complete communities right now. I think some of the challenges are, you know, and Brian and Mike are aware of these, the sort of rounding up, and you round up each individual thing, and, you know, the sort of how the density is calculated. But there are a lot of people looking at complete communities. And like I said, we are looking at a lot of properties and saying, you know, hey, you've got this permit already on your property, but we think you can get more if you actually get rid of your permit. So again, it's really hard for people to get rid of a permit that they spent many years and hundreds of thousands of dollars getting. But in some cases, we're finding that because Mike and his team and Elise and their team are doing such a great job in making the rules easier, you know, sometimes it pays, you know, to get rid of your permit and just go back to ministerial. One of the challenges, I think, and Brian, I'll be curious to hear, and Gilman and David with complete communities, one of the things we're finding is some of the design requirements of complete communities. We're a little concerned that we're going to end up with a lot of projects that look exactly the same because they are a little bit restrictive on the design requirements. So Gilman, I'm not sure if you can opine on that, if what you're finding on that, but that is one of the things that we're starting to see.
So Marcella, you're saying that the design requirements for complete communities can be a bit onerous?
And will they end up with projects that all look the same because of that? So I think maybe, you know, Brian and Mike, just the consideration of, you know, some flexibility on that, because otherwise you're going to be able to pick out which project was done with complete communities.
It was hard for us because we'd already permitted it, and then we tried to fit in the complete communities box. That was hard. But I think in general, if you're going in with a blank slate, I think, you know, 95 feet, 6.5 FAR, unlimited density, no parking. I mean, I think you've got everything you need there from a design and a massing perspective to get it done. And to answer the other question, I would do more complete communities projects. Absolutely. I think the days of concrete for the next year or two might be over due to inflation. But other than that,
and lumber's not helping.
Well, lumber's not far behind. That's a real big problem.
I mean, aside from the big dogs who all pre-bought their lumber a year ago, you know.
Big dogs. All right, look, it's 1 o'clock. Marcella, Gilman, David, thank you so much for your insights as to using these programs. Mike, Brian, thanks for all your work to develop these programs. And with that, we will thank all of you for participating in today's webinar and hopefully join us again for our next one. We hope that you found this informative. So thanks everyone and have a great afternoon.
Bye.